What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Scream 3. I watched it again, and I guess for context, I've only ever seen, this may surprise people, but I have said it before, I've only ever seen Scream 3 now 2 times. I saw it once, and now I saw it again a few weeks ago. I also, in terms of real-time recording this, I'd seen Scream 4 one time, and last night, on Halloween night, I watched Scream 4 for the second time. So I have kind of renewed thoughts for these. This is part of, my kind of series where I'm talking about this stuff. So I want to talk about Scream 3, whether it is just not a good movie or maybe like a beautiful masterpiece that's kind of misunderstood or somewhere in between. But my thoughts on it, kind of looking at it now, obviously talking about Scream as much as I do online and having not seen this movie in forever. So let's just go into it. Scream 3 to me is a good movie. I like it. I like the movie. I think Hollywood has just gone really downhill, really far downhill over the last, I would say like 10 to 15 years. I guess there's pockets of it that are still very successful. Obviously, there's been success, but I'd say in terms of quality, it's fallen quite big, and I think it's going to continue over the next several years. So what I'm basically saying is I think putting Scream 3 up against, and specifically if you even want to go in the genre or a trilogy, when you go to like a horror movie trilogy, right? It's very hard, I would say, to beat Scream. It is, and that's definitely biased. Like, there's no doubt about it. Specifically because I don't watch too much horror, although I have seen actually quite a bit once I kind of go through the movies I have seen. And when you look at sequels and even, the final act of the trilogy, I think Scream 3 holds up, like, remarkably well. I think it is one of the better third movies in any horror franchise, regardless, because a lot of them just, they start good and then they go completely, some of them have like 30 entries, some of them have like 5, but they go downhill. So I would say putting it up against the competition, which is something I do think is fair to argue, Scream 3 does a really good job. Now, in terms of the Scream franchise, it's easily the worst one, but not even in my opinion. And now I know there's a pocket of the internet that loves Scream 3, and by the way, I'm not saying I don't love it. I do think I love it. I do. I think it's okay to love something that's not very good. And maybe that's a shot to the face to some people. But again, I'm not the most serious person. Don't take what I'm saying, as law. But no, I think that's where I stand. I love the movie. I'm happy it happened. I'm happy to have seen it 2 times now. And, I'll see it occasionally in the future. I don't want to see these movies, honestly, too many times. I really don't. It's not really how I roll, except for like Pirates of the Caribbean. That's the only franchise that I love the most of any movie franchise that I've watched, countless times. But the issue with Scream 3, I think, is just it's so all over the place. It's got a lot of wasted potential. So let me say some good things about it. Sydney is easily, and I don't know rankings for that other people have done for this movie, but Sydney is easily the best character again in this movie. Now, I don't think she's the best character in 2. I think she is in 1. In fact, I did a top 10 characters of Scream 1. She's easily the best in 1, and she's, I think, even better than that, and probably the best character version of, like, any character that we've seen in any of those 3 movies, maybe even 4. Every single time Sydney is on the screen in 3, she steals it. And you could argue she does that always, but she literally steals it. And they put her through a lot in terms of like emotion and what she's going through, and her like freaking out in her mind, just having these hallucinations and all this stuff and just messing with her. It's like really good. So, Neve Campbell, obviously incredible. Another thing I really loved about it is the ending. I'm not so much happy with like the house party at the end, like that entire third act. But in terms of the Sydney versus Ghostface thing, I do want to make a ranking of several different aspects of all the Scream movies. I think that would be fun, and maybe you guys would like it. But I do think it would be like up there, and I don't really know where it would stand versus like 1. But I feel like it could be the best of, I guess 2 and 4. I think 3 may be the best, just in terms of her versus Roman. Going in, watching like the movie play out, a long kind of Ghostface monologue or narration, and then just the entire fight. Him shooting her, and you think, oh my, and again, like I don't know at the time, because it came out in 2000. I was 4. I didn't see it then, so like at the time. Again, like this is a movie that is supposed to break rules. That's what Randy had said. So it's like, yeah, I mean, anything can happen, and you just don't know. So I loved all of it, literally from the point of Sydney going into really actually when Sydney just goes to the house. From that point on, it's actually like incredibly good. Like maybe the best of the three in some ways. So I really, really do like that. But again, though, a lot of that is on Sydney. The rest of the movie really is on Dewey and Gale, which I think they do a good job, but I don't think they do as good of a job as they did in 2, specifically Gale, because Gale in 2 I think is just, and now that, again, I'm not saying like acting performance, but like the writing and the character that Gale, the character arc, I guess, that Gale goes through in 2 is so good. I think she's the best character in 2 versus 3, where they're kind of just like there. I will say one other, I guess, positive before we start going to some negatives. I like the idea of Hollywood. Like, literally the premise of, talking about these producers and these actors and the life of these stars. And I think I even watched kind of a behind the scenes of 3, and Neve Campbell was talking about that too, that they're going into that kind of, world, like what these people are living in. And I mean, that was sweet, especially looking at it now, with the Weinsteins and all that stuff. Like, they were calling that stuff out, and especially because they're literally the producers of Scream, right? But they were like calling out this stuff in the movie. So I think in terms of kind of being risky and taking in that direction, they were. Now, did they like know? It actually kind of gets a little scary where it's like they better not have known, that this stuff was going on and had the power to like bring to light this stuff. Otherwise, I'd really be looking down at some of these stars and Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven, all that stuff. So I really would like to believe that they, that these were kind of like rumors and stuff, and it's kind of a thing where like, yeah, well, what happens, but there's no like evidence. We can't actually say anything about it. I hope it's more like that, but I did like that aspect of it. I really, really did. Now, and I guess, well, I'm going to just keep going. I mean, it just keeps going. I would say the beginning is pretty solid. It's not the greatest. It's definitely better than the opening of Scream 4, I would say, but it's probably the weakest of the trilogy. And then when Sydney gets chased through the recreation of Scream 1, that's a really good sequence just all together. Again, though, I guess that would fall in any Sydney moment in this movie, for when she's taking phone calls, at home. Literally anything that has to do with Sydney in this movie is top-notch, is really, really good. Better than, I would say, everything that she was in, scene by scene, in Scream 2. I'd honestly argue that. But the rest of the movie is, I would say, very, very weak by comparison, again, by just Scream standards, or just when watching it, you're like, why? Now, I know that they didn't have her that long, right? That's like the big thing with Scream 3, is they had very limited time to record with Neve Campbell. And again, though, it kind of shows. She's gone for so, in Scream 4, she's like in a house the whole time, but at least she's there. And I would argue she's got more screen time. In fact, I don't know like the statistics, but I'm pretty sure she has more screen time in 4 than in 3. However, though, like most of her screen time in 3 is that ending, is the entire ending. But I think it suffers from that. And I would imagine at the time even, you'd be thinking, wow, maybe that's how it's built. Maybe that's how the mentality of Sydney is just as much of Scream as like Ghostface is. And even I somewhat have that mindset. Not hugely, but I do think a lot of Scream, or it's kind of underrated how much Sydney is, or Neve Campbell is Scream, not just Ghostface. And maybe that's built up by that, because like without Sydney in 3, you really didn't have that great of a movie. And you could argue, though, in 2, they did a really good job with everybody else. I guess that's where it starts to fall apart, right? In 2, you still had some pretty charismatic characters. You still had Randy around for, like, the first half of it. And I would say, like, the killers were pretty charismatic as well in 2. Whereas in 3, pretty much every side character besides Dewey, Gale, and Sydney, so besides, like, the main 3, they were all so forgettable. I can't tell you. Even though I've seen it twice, and I just watched it, a week or so ago from when I'm recording this, I don't know any of their names. I don't know. I can remember their faces, and I remember what happens to them, but I don't remember anything about their personality or them. They're just so forgettable, and that I think is the biggest. Now there's a fair amount of that in Scream 4 as well, but they also do hit some. What I mean? Like Kirby was a hit. I kind of like Jill. There's hits where it's like, oh, these characters have a little charisma. They have a little something that kind of sticks out. In 3, there's none of it. Even Roman, now again, I like him at the end, but for the entire movie, I mean, he's like not in it for being the killer. And, you know, obviously they're trying to, as always, right? They're trying to make it seem like it could be anybody. You know, again, we have to keep a couple options open. And by the way, I do appreciate them switching it up a little bit where it's only one killer, it's not two, right? So I like that. But, you know, for doing that and for it keeping maybe like 3 or 4 characters in contention, maybe 3, the entire time, Roman's like not in it. So like you kind of forget about him, and then he appears, and he really, to me, he's not, I don't like him as a character for you know, 90% of the movie. The ending, his motive maybe is the best motive of any of them. I would argue that. I would argue in terms of like really like emotional depth. Okay, now again, like Billy said, like there's some like scariness to motives, you know what I mean, and you don't need the greatest motive, you don't need a motive at all. I mean, I agree with that, but I think Roman's may actually be the best. So it's really tough because I don't really think he's a good character, and he doesn't really stand out at all throughout the entire movie, but then at the end he's actually really good in terms of his motive, in terms of just the talk with Sydney, the fight with Sydney. He's good. I like him. But for the rest of it, he just does not stand out. And again, I would argue Dewey and Gale don't do, like, they're just not as good. I would really argue that they are not as good at all as they are in 2. And I think that, again, when you don't have Sydney in it, like you didn't have her in every scene in 1 or 2, but there's just so much going on in those. And even in 2, you know, as like a sequel, it holds up. It's still okay. In 3, though, you spend so much time with these, literally like the B team, right, that it just doesn't do anything, and they get dispatched so easily, many of them, you know what I mean? There's not very elaborate. There's really like one major chase, and maybe I'm forgetting it, but like, you know, Sydney's chase in the recreation, that's like the biggest chase of the entire movie. And then I guess the third, you know, like the third act, like the house, with like Dewey and Gale. A lot of that stuff is okay, but even that, like, characters make some horrible decisions, by the way, in 3. Which there is some horrible decision making in 2 as well, including Sydney, like them planning that Sydney would go back to like the stage, like to end the movie. Like that entire thing was all dedicated on Sydney hearing music and going into that building after the car stuff. Way too, like, that was way too specific and way too, like, this is the only way this will happen, and it worked. It's like, I don't really like that. But that, in a nutshell, is what 3 did throughout the entire, you know what I mean? That's what 3's entirely about. Just characters making really bad decision-making throughout. Or I guess, not necessarily bad. They're still smarter than, like, the average horror characters, but they're not nearly as smart as, like, they've been in previous movies. So, again, it definitely is mixed, I would say. There is a lot to love about it, and I would think, like, I'm not even one that like only watches like certain parts of movies. Like I was about to say, maybe I would watch Scream 3 multiple times and only watch like the best scenes, because there's some incredible scenes that I think like stack up as some of the best in the entire series. I do believe that. But yet again, it's like I kind of would just want to watch maybe the entire movie. It really is that, though. It's built up off of these very strong moments and then just a lot of weakness. It just is, you know, even like Mark Kincaid, like he's cool. I don't mind him, but he's not really, and, you know, I hope he does marry Sydney, and he is, you know, her husband in 5, but he's not the most standout character in the world. He's definitely like probably the top of, you know, the group they had in Scream 3. But I don't know, that's I really think it was a movie that was hurt by Neve not being available as much. And I don't really know what you would have done if you had her in the entire movie. You know, like we talked about a little while ago, like, does Randy help it? Like, if Randy would, now Randy is in it, and that was a great scene, by the way, but if he was in it, like alive, right, how much does he help? Would he help? Probably. So, like, you have that kind of lingering as well. Oh, also, I guess there's that. Final thing I'll say, it's the least meta movie out of all of them. You know, there's so much explanation going, and maybe that gets boring after a while, granted. And maybe they thought, you know, we don't need to keep doing this. We need to have maybe one established scene with Randy telling Sydney, you know, the rules of, you know, the third movie in a trilogy, and that's good. And that's a great scene, and I love it. And it does basically say everything that needs to be said. But you just watch 1, 2, and 4 again, And it's like you are constantly having these explanations of what these movies, can be. And I don't think they really do that enough in 3. And the final thing I want to say that I actually just remember now, one thing that I think is comically bad and just a bonehead decision that I don't know why they did it, is Ghostface's voice. So you have an incredible voice actor to do Ghostface, and it's clear because, again, like, I watched 3 and then I watched 4 a week later. I don't know what, like, behind the scenes they were thinking, but, like, for 4, I think they leaned into him a lot. You know what I mean? They're like, let's go back to the beginning. Let's use you. You're going to have some really cool lines. You're going to have some longer dialogue. It's not going to be like 10 seconds. Like, you're going to have some really long phone calls. 4 is probably the best that we've gotten, I would say, from Roger L. Jackson, okay? There's maybe better conversations in 1 or, etc., but in terms of, like, 4, he's really good. Again, 3... I like the ending, the monologue that Roman is saying to Sydney. That's cool. But besides them, the idea of taking the voice and repeating it back and then mixing it in with his voice, in my opinion, is very stupid. Again, you have this guy who can just play. Obviously, he's got the same voice, but he takes on the role of the killer in each one. You know what I mean? So you're getting a different version of him, technically, in every single movie, even a couple different ones in a movie because of more than one killer. And so your idea is to use him maybe like 20% of the time, and then 80% of the time you're using just the voice. It is clever in a way. It is. I like the idea that he's literally recording kind of everything, and that he's using it back and getting people to, I mean, I guess maybe like the new age technology, that was the idea too, right? Oh, like, this is cool. Like, people can clone things now, and people can, replicate it. I get it, but at the same time, you just have somebody who's so good. And clearly they went back to that in 4. You know what I mean? Like, so that was, maybe they realized that was a mistake and they kept going, or they went backwards, which is a good thing. But, like, I don't know, like, it really sucked. It's easily the worst that they did with Ghostface in 3, because his voice is barely in it, okay? And that just, I think, really hurt. Maybe it doesn't feel like it hurts the movie, but then you listen or watch the other ones, right? And it's so good that you're like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you are. You know what I mean? Even like Randy, you don't maybe know in the moment what you're missing out on, but then you watch 1 and 2, and it's like, yeah, like, what could they have done with him, though, in 3, right? Could have made it special. So that's my thoughts. I will have more videos on 3, whether it be ranking or different aspects of 3. So we will be covering in 4 and all the other, all the movies. So I want to make a bunch of these videos. I've been doing it. You guys seem to really like it. So let me know what you guys think of Scream 3 in the comments below. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when all these videos go up. If you want to follow me on Twitter or subscribe to my second channel or support us on Patreon or YouTube memberships, links for all of them are in the description below. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope to see you all on the next video.